In this section, we're going to create our final project for the chapter, and what we're going to do is we're going to take our JSON file with the movies in it, and we're going to create a dynamic Dropbox drop down where it'll be populated with the movies from our file, and then when we select a particular movie, it'll give us the info, the year, genre, and director, and this is all being grabbed asynchronously, so we don't need any page refreshes. We just change the Dropbox, and it's all coming from the movies.json file. Now I have this on a domain, my techguysstaging.com domain, because in some environments Ajax, it won't work if you're just working locally. So if you have your own hosting, then you can just upload your files there. And as we have in past sections, we're using Notepad++ with the NPP FTP plugin. So I'm actually going to connect to my site. And in the public HTML, I have a folder called Ajax, and that has the final subfolder, which is this here. So I'm going to go to just the Ajax folder, which has nothing in it. So this is where we'll create our files. So I'm going to create a new file called index.html, and aside from that, all we need is our JSON file, and I'm going to upload that through FileZilla. And we'll open that up to take a look, because it is, I believe it's a little different than the one we created. Alright, so very simple. We have a JSON object. Objects are created with curly braces, and then we have one property in here called movies, and that is equal to an array which has a movie in each value. Okay, so that's pretty much it, and each movie has a title, a year, a genre, and a director. Alright, so that's the JSON file. So let's go to our index.html, and I'm going to paste in my HTML structure. And the HTML, the actual HTML for this script or this file is very simple. We're going to create a div, and this is just going to be a container, and inside that we're going to have an h1 tag, my favorite movies, and under that we're just going to have two more divs, and these are going to act as placeholders for our Ajax data. So we're going to say this is going to be called movie title, and then we'll have a BR tag, and we want another div that's going to be called movie info. So that's all of our HTML. Now these placeholders, movie title, movie info, if we go to our, let's go to our finished product, the title div is going to hold the actual select box with the values. The movie info is this. After we select a movie and it shows us the year, genre, and director, that's going in, that's being put into the movie info div through Ajax asynchronously. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is, first of all, let's look at our page. Of course, all we have is the heading because we haven't put anything into the divs yet. So let's just add some styling to this, very minimal styling. So let's style, and let's first work with the h1 tag, which is all we see at the moment, and that's going to be text align to the center. And why isn't that big? Oh, I forgot to put my I'm going to finish that container tag. Alright, so now we have an H1 tag that's in the middle. And I guess that's all we'll style for now because that's all we can see. So let's go up. Actually, should we do this in the head? Yeah, in the head we want to put our functions, and we'll do that right below the title. So let's open up some script tags. Alright, so in here we're going to have a function, and this function is going to populate our Dropbox. Alright, not only populate it, but it's going to also create the HTML for it and put it right in that div, that title div. Alright, so it's going to be called get movie titles. And it doesn't take any parameters. I'm going to type in, I'm going to paste in our starter Ajax code, which we saw in the previous sections. So we're just creating a variable, and then we're checking to see if the window.xml HTTP request object is available. And if it is, that means that the user is using a browser other than IE6 or lower. So pretty much everybody. And then we're going to assign the object to our variable. And this else is just in case they're using IE6 or below, then we just have to assign it using this ActiveX object. So that's what that does. We've gone over all this in past sections. So next we're going to do the Onreadystatechange. We're going to equal to a function, and in that function we're going to check the ready state, make sure that it's with 4, and we're going to make sure that the status is 200. So that's just checking to make sure that everything's ready to go. And in here is where we're going to put all our code. And then finally we're going to use the open method to get the data from movies.json, and that's going to be asynchronously. And then finally we'll use the send method to actually populate the data into this div. Alright, so everything we're going to do, we're going to put right in this area. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the response, and if you remember, you can get it through response text, through the response text property, or the response XML property. Now we want JSON, and there is no response JSON properties, so we have to use a function. So let's first just create the variable. We'll say JSON data, and we're just going to, for now, equal that to HTTP, XML HTTP dot response text. And this is just for plain text. This is not going to give us JSON. In order to use JSON, we need to use a function called json.parse, and we just need to wrap that response text in that function. Alright, so that's all set. The next thing we want to do is create a new variable called movies, and that's going to be equal to JSON data dot movies, and that's referring to the movies array. If you see, if we go to our JSON file, the array is called movies, so that's where that's coming from. Alright, so next we want to start to build our output variable, which ultimately will contain all the HTML as well as the values we grabbed from JSON. So let's start with variable output equals, and we're going to have a form tag. It doesn't need any attributes, just a form tag. And the next thing we're going to do is add to that output. So output plus equals means append, so we're adding to this, to what's already in the variable. And we're going to want our select tag. So So in that select tag, we want, first of all, an ID, and it's going to be equal to movie select, and we also want an event handler. We want the onChange event handler, and that's just whenever the drop down is changed. So whenever you select a new value. So onChange, we want to run a function called movie select, which we'll create in a minute. Alright, so that looks good. So that's the select tag. So next thing we need to do is get the option tags and values. So if we look at our final product, if we look at the HTML here, we have the select tag, and then we have these options. Now, to create these options and populate them with the titles, we need to create a loop. So we're going to say output, we're going to create the loop. We're going to say for, this is going to be a for loop, variable I equals 0, and we're going to say as long as I is less than movies.length, and then we want to increment. So as long as I is less than movies.length, which in this case is 5. If you look at our JSON file, we have 5 different movies. Now what we want to do is add to our output variable. So we want to say plus equals, and we want our option tags. So option, and what we need to fill in here is the value, and those will be the numeric values. You can see we have 0 through 4, and then in the option tags is where the actual movie titles will go. So let's start with the value, and the value is just going to be equal to I. So each iteration I is going to increment by 1, so that'll add the value. Alright, so all we need to do here is concatenate. So we'll have these single quotes and then the plus signs and then the I in the middle. So that'll give us the value. Next thing we need to do is add the titles. So we do that by concatenating. I'm not sure if it's called concatenating in JavaScript. I do a lot of PHP, and it's called concatenating in PHP. So forgive me if I'm using the wrong terminology, but it's basically just mixing strings in JavaScript. So in here we want to say movies I and then dot title. So that should give us the title of each movie in each iteration. So after the for loop, we want to close our select. So we'll say output plus equals select. Okay, and then we want to close our form tag. So output form. Alright, so we're done building our output variable, or whatever you want to call it, value. So what we need to do now is actually insert all this data that's in our output variable into this div, this movie title div, and we can do that with document dot get element by ID, and the ID that we want to get here is movie title, and then we're just going to say dot inner HTML, which just inserts content into this div, and that's going to be equal to the output variable, which is going to contain everything we've done from here to here. So the form, the select, and the options. Now I've created this function, but we haven't yet, we haven't run it. So it's just sitting there. So we need to have a way to actually run get movie titles, and one of the ways we can do that is with the onload event handler, and we can add that to the body tag. So if we say body onload, and we can then put our function in here, which is get movie titles. So, alright, so if we save that and reload, okay, so we're getting an error that says get movie titles is not defined. I'm not sure why. You know what, I'm going to pause this and see what's going on, so be back in a second. Oh, alright, this is a little embarrassing. I actually forgot to close one of these curly braces. Here we have the Onreadystatechange function, and that's not being closed. So I'm just going to indent this code. And I apologize if you made the same mistake. So that function is not being closed, so we should have a parenthesis, closing curly brace right there. So that should do it. Alright, so now we have our select box with all the values inside. So we have this box, and if we select something in our code, what we're doing is calling the movie select function, and you can see in the console movie select is not defined. So that's what we need to do next. So in the same script tag, we want to make sure we're out of the get movie titles function, and we want to start another function called movie select. Now the main purpose of this function is to grab the selected value. So in this case it's Saving Private Ryan. We change it to Superbad, and this is what we want to grab. Okay, so we can do that. We're going to create a new variable called select box, and that's going to be equal to the ID of the select box, which you can see up here is movie select. So we want to use the get element by ID. And that's going to be movie select. And that's it. We're just creating that variable. Now we're going to create another variable called movie index. Actually, I should make this in uppercase B. So movie index is going to equal select box dot options. So what we're doing, we're not getting the actual select box. We want the option that is selected or shown. So we do that with the select box variable dot options, and then we need to open up some brackets and select box dot selected index. I know it looks a little confusing. We now need to add on the value. So it's a little confusing, but this is what we need to use in order to grab the value of the currently selected value. So in this case, the departed, whichever one is selected. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is call another function that's called get movie info, which we're going to create now, but that's going to take a parameter of movie index. Okay, so we're grabbing the selected value, and then we're inputting it as a parameter into the get movie info function, which we'll create now. And that's the function that'll actually get the year and genre and so on, and then insert that into the movie info div. So that's what this will do. Alright, so the get movie info is taking a parameter, which is the movie index. So in this case, I'm just going to call it I. So now we can work with that, with the I. So we need to create our standard Ajax code once again. So I'm going to grab that. Here. Actually, I'll just copy it from the get movie titles. So I'm going to grab the I'm actually going to grab the entire function, put it in here, and get rid of this line on. So this is just our standard Ajax code. Okay, so what we want to do now, actually we don't need to get rid of all of that. We still want to create the JSON data variable. We still want the movies variable. All we're really going to change here is the output. So I'm going to get rid of all that output, and we can, this last line, we're going to be inserting the output into the movie info div. So let's just change that. Okay, so now all we need to do is build up our output variable. So I'm going to say variable output. Now let's take a look at our final script, and when we select a movie, this is what we're looking to get. And if we look at the HTML of this, it's the div ID of movie info. What we're inserting here are list items, so the year, genre, and director. So what we want to do is first just set it to nothing. So we're just declaring the variable here, and there's nothing in it, there's no value in it. The next thing we want to do is grab the first list item, which if we go to our project is the year. Alright, so let's see, we want output plus equal, and we want some list tags. And inside that, we want to output the current selected movie's year. So let's first just type out year, and then concatenate on. We want movies, and then brackets with the I, and then dot year. So this I is coming from here, from this I, which is the movies, the current selected movie index. So I hope that you can understand that. I know it's a little tricky, but it's really very simple when you really see it for what it is. It's just whatever movie is selected, and we're using the year. So the next thing, as you can probably guess, all we need to do now is change the property. So this will be changed to genre, and this will be director, and we also should change the headings or whatever you want to call them. So genre, director. Okay, so that looks good. Let's save that and see if this is working. Alright, so it looks like it's working. One thing we didn't do is finish our styling. I just want to move that in the middle. So let's first, we'll say the H4. Actually, no, there's no H4. We want to style the list items, and we want list style none because we don't want any bullets. Let's say padding left 5 pixels, and we also want to style the container div, and that's going to have a width of 600 pixels. Margin, we'll say 80 pixels on the top and bottom, and auto on the right and left, which will make it centered. Overflow hidden, I just like to throw that in. And let's make a border, and that'll be 1 pixel. We'll make it dark gray. And let's make it dashed. And we'll set a minimum height of 200 pixels. Alright, so let's save that. Whoop. Reload, and okay, let's just add some padding onto the container as well. we'll say 15 pixels. Okay, if we reload, now we have a nice box. Select the movie, and I added the minimum 200 pixels just to kind of keep the box the same size, where you can see all the info. So that's it for this project. It's a really great example of how Ajax works, especially with Json. So next we'll be getting into server-side scripting and PHP.